a great opportunity for us to play in a, just what we understand as a pretty hostile environment. I think it's a great place to play, and obviously this day, in the history of that program means a lot, and we'll do that with respect and honor, and make sure that we understand the gravity of that situation. But at the same time, I think we're playing some pretty good football right now. Our guys are coming together as a team and starting to, really hit their stride. And it's going to take a whole lot of that to be able to pull this game off. This is a really good team that we're about to play, and we're excited for the opportunity.
How much have you noticed the last couple of weeks with the extended periods off, your guys having the chance to get healthy and kind of, rest up a little bit at the midpoint of the season?
Yeah, and we talked a lot about that and said these are not necessarily days off. These are rest days, and there's a big difference between a day off and a rest day. And we wanted them to stay focused and understand that those rest days are for their body, not for their mind. They had to still stay focused and make sure that they were watching games and studying their opponent and having a good understanding of what they're ultimately up against. But yeah, that was a big piece of it. We talked about those as rest days, not as days off.
The last few weeks, what is sort of the message to the players been during halftime, especially from you and Coach Hitchler to the defense?
Just unbelievable, motivation by us. I think that we just changed the entire game plan, and just our coaching was phenomenal. No, it's really that they just got to get out there and feel the speed of these two teams we played were fast, and they were high tempo, fast teams that were able to throw the ball around with a lot of really capable, talented players. And I think that takes a minute to get caught up to. And then, for us in the second half, there's just some extra bullets that we hadn't yet fired that we were able to use in the second half on both sides of the ball. And I think that just speaks to the volume, speaks in volume about the intelligence of this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball and on the offensive side of the ball, and truly on special teams. Everybody really finds a way to understand the game they're in and then find a way to execute at a high level, attack weaknesses, continue to solidify strengths, and just continue to do their 1/11th. I think that's the best thing that could happen is you walk out on this field and you trust, that you are going to do your job, and then trust that the other guys around you are going to do theirs. And I think that's where we're at right now. We have, some unbelievable, compete periods and crossover periods every single day of the week during practice. And I think that iron on iron is the best thing that we could do right now in this program. So, there's a lot that is demanded of them. There's not any coaches that are going to relax or rest. There's no players that are going to relax or rest. And we understand that this is, we just got to continue to take those steps forward and get better every single week.
For a few weeks there at the beginning of the season, it looked like the turnovers had slowed down for you guys. And then over the last couple of weeks, it seems like guys like DJ have been in the right place at the right time to get the tip balls. even Xavier getting his interception, DJ's what would have been his second one if it wasn't called back. Yeah. What have you seen that's kind of different now that's allowing kind of an uptick in those forced turnovers?
Well, I think that, some of the games, if you went back, and looked at them, there were teams that were committed to keeping the ball on the ground. We were in tighter games where the other team didn't have to necessarily throw the ball and air it out a lot. And I think that, was the case. I think these last two, these teams are playing catch up and trying to, or trying to continue to accelerate their offense at the rate that it had been going in the first half. And then that presents opportunities. And, to be able to come out there. Again, I think the offense has a lot to do with that, the defensive side of it as well, to come out and in that first drive, put one in the back of the end zone right away. Now the other team's really, desperate to score and trying to move the ball down the field again, and opportunities are going to present themselves. We got to make the most of them. We leave that game with 3, and realistically could have been leaving there with 5, and we have to continue that trend.
I wanted to ask you about Coach Hitchler, and I don't mean to be vague, but if you had to pinpoint maybe a part of his scheme or his ability to lead the defense, what's kind of impressed you the most about his season so far as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think that, there's simplicity in what we do, even though it might look complex to an offense. I think that there's, puzzle pieces that get put together, and everybody has their role and where they fit in that. But because of the base knowledge of it and because of how it was installed all the way back on day one, you can move a lot of these people around to do a lot of different things, but they just see it as I do this, in this defense. Now in this one, I'm doing that same thing just from a different location maybe. And then I think his ability to just continually be relentless in pursuit of, these guys playing their best football. And it's hard, it's challenging, and there's moments where, I'm sure it's loud and it's aggressive the way he's coaching, but it's because he wants them to, play the best football they possibly can come Saturdays. And I think everybody understands that there's a standard that we're all being held to here. And it's when it starts internally, from our players leading up to the coaches, I think that's a big part of this. So the ability for them to never want to not be coached, for them to never want to relax, for them to always be continually trying to get better, that's a coach's dream, because then you could continue to push and you don't have to worry about too much about emotions and feelings, because everybody's trying to get to the final goal of being the best they possibly can be, and he's relentless at that.
Not to switch subject too much, but I want to ask you about Sluka. If you wouldn't mind kind of letting us in a little bit, what the conversations were like when you were bringing him over in the winter, obviously because of y'all's success together in the past.
Yeah.
And Alonzo obviously still being here when he was recruited. What was kind of the message to him, knowing that it would be his last year of eligibility, and as things were kind of trending, towards good for Alon's health?
Yeah, I think like anything else, this is an opportunity to come and compete. Like that's the same exact conversation we have with every single player on this team. And regardless of what position you play, I think obviously the quarterback, spot gets highlighted a little differently, and there's more noise around that. But ultimately, it's the ability to come and compete. That's what everybody hopes for and everybody dreams for, and the ability to put as much talent in every room as you can so that they can compete. I look at some programs out there who were just watching the other day. Syracuse might be on like their fourth quarterback right now. So you don't want to not have a room that has talented players in it.
Over the last couple of weeks, it seems like we're starting to see Alonzo play some of his best football. And even early against Texas State, he has that interception, but comes back and, seems to lead the offense the way you guys needed him to. What's he like on the sidelines after a moment like that where you kind of need to correct and move forward?
He's phenomenal. I think he sees it as well as anybody. You watch him, and in that game, he said it to me, pretty early. He's like, they're playing a dangerous game. He's like, these safeties are in the box. They're leaving us one-on-one on the outsides. Like, there's going to be a moment here where we're going to make them pay. And he sees it as clear as anybody, and I think those are the things that stand out to me, the amount of work he puts into it, throughout the week, the amount of study he does when he watches film, all the quarterbacks, almost every position group right now, is doing that. And I think that's, a sign of a really good team. But there's moments on the sideline where he just missed something and he knew it and he was frustrated with it, but excited to get back to it. And that's probably a theme that runs throughout this entire program. I watched DJ at a moment, get beat, and he's talking about the technique. He's like, I'm good. I just got to fix this. They're not getting caught up in the emotion of what just happened. They're focused on the motion of what they got to do next to make sure that they can be successful. So when you watch our team get better from week to week, it's pretty cool to be on the sidelines and watch them get better play to play, and that is it. Like take, Eaglin in ODU game of that first half, and to come back out in the second and never hang his head and just know I'm going to get an opportunity. When I do, I'm going to make the most of it. Ends up being the first play after halftime, and then there's another one later. But they don't get caught up in the emotion. They get caught up in what do I got to do to get better, and they let one play live at a time, and they figure out ways to continually grow within the course of the game. And when you do that for a whole season, and then you do it every snap of the game, and don't hang your head, don't get caught up in it, you have a chance for major success. And I think, the question started with Zoe, and I think he's phenomenal at it. But I think there's a lot of other guys in this program that do that exact same thing.
Wanted to ask you about your offensive line. In 5 conference games, they've only allowed 5 sacks. You've had couple 200-yard rushing games, couple 300-yard rushing games. What do you attribute to the success of the offensive line and the way they've played the last few weeks? Their
intelligence, their pre-snap thought process, their pad level, their first step, and then there's a series of efforts in there that they are having on every single play. You take a guy, like Sweezy, who you'll talk to here in a minute. There's not like, hey, let me just kind of block my guy and call it a day. Like there is this willingness and desire to finish, every single play and play harder than the guy with the football in his hands. And that is, what I think is a hallmark of a great offense, is that you're willing to play harder and longer than the guy with the football in his hands. And that is what these guys do on a day-to-day basis. So it starts there with a relentlessness, a toughness, a competitive drive, and then not just laying it all on the line for each other, a series of efforts over and over and over again. That has a lot to do with it. Now, Now, as far as the run game, the ability to move some bodies is really good, but you got to add the tight ends in there. Then you got to add in the running backs, and you got to add in the quarterback. When we get into, some of the read things or the +1 stuff, all of it starts to add up. It doesn't just happen, that we just handed the ball off and that's it. There's a lot of scheme that goes into it, and I think our coaches do a really good job of identifying the game they're in. Is the game plan working? Yes, stay the course. If it's not, what adjustments do we need to make and put these guys in the best situations possible to be successful? So a lot of it has to do with their study. A lot of it has to do with their effort, and their competitive levels are, phenomenal right now.
You talk about scheme. How much do you think it helps just having a second year in this system and a better understanding of what you guys are trying to do in Coach Kennedy's scheme?
Yeah, a ton. I think that, when you get to those adjustments that need to be made, or you get into building a game plan like we're doing yesterday into today, there's things you could recall and things maybe you haven't even used yet, but you've been doing them or have, just need to dust them off, from, a year ago or from earlier in the season. That's all a big piece of it. If you're just every week trying to create a whole new offense with, not knowing who you are as a team and what your strengths and weaknesses are because you haven't had any success yet, that gets to be daunting. But I think the way that our guys go about it and their understanding of what this offense is and all the moving parts of it and the different types of scheme that we use and the purpose of it and the intent of the play called, I think that's where we see this success.
Looking ahead to Marshall, it seems like when they made this change at quarterback, that he kind of brings just a totally different dimension, and they really have taken off. What have you kind of seen? I guess we'll start with the offensive side of the ball. What do you see from them?
Well, I see that there's a lot of scheme, that they're predominantly running zone, that is ultimately what they do with, a lot of different elements where the quarterback could keep the ball. That's sort of their top scheme part of it. But then you get into this quarterback run game, and it's special, right? They do a lot of misdirection. There's a ton of different, motion action off of it, or wrong way run in the backfield with the bash plays, and they're putting themselves in a situation where this quarterback, can, carry a heavy load. But then off every single quarterback run play, there's a play action shot that comes off of it. So if you end up, trying to add back in to get the extra hat to the quarterback, they're going to make you pay for that. They have a ton of, max protection shots off their run scheme where they're able to shoot it downfield. I think number 4 is phenomenal. 0 is phenomenal. 81, the tight end, is phenomenal. Their run game is really, really strong and really, really good. And then they are not afraid to move the pocket and have a bunch of trick plays that go with it. They hide this tight end at tackle, I think 7 different times this year, where, that kid's shooting down the middle of the field, mostly in too high looks, but they're not afraid to fire some bullets in trick plays from reverses to whatever it might be. And then there's this underlying theme of how do we get 4 of the ball? How do we get 4 of the ball on jets, on reverses? How do we get them the ball as many different ways on screens as we can? And that's, to me, a sign of a really good offense. They're not going to ever just play in one sandbox and say this is just what we do. They're really diversified, and they will keep you on your toes, and there's a lot of offense that you got to defend.
How about them on defense? I know we saw them on Thursday against Coastal. Just kind of what stood out the last couple of weeks when you've seen them.
Well, I go back to the ODU game in particular. That was like, man, however many snaps were in that game, I think more than 3/4 of them were in straight zero. Man, like just no help over the top, and we were loading this box, and we were going to play a violent, aggressive style of football. And they've done that now over the past couple of weeks. You go to their cut-ups of the plays that they made in sacks. They are downhill, they are aggressive, and they will just unload the clip any chance they can and be as aggressive as they possibly can. Now, with that, leave some guys in one-on-one scenarios that you got to make sure that you're able to, play that game too and compete downfield, make contested catches, run good routes, make sure the timing's right, understand where your hots are, have all of that. But then there's, the screen game element that seems to have worked against them a little bit. But there's a lot in here that they do. They're in a 3 down front, but both the ends are 300 pounds. So it's like they are aggressive, strong guys that will blitz from anywhere at any point in time. So, they're not lacking for aggression, and they're not lacking for ability to get after the quarterback and to be physical and violent downfield, against these receivers.
Just want to talk with the running back room. I know we've talked about a lot of guys last Tuesday, another guy entered the run back room with Trishawn. Just again, a couple carries at the end. How fun was that? Getting to see him get some actual reps out there.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, you go back and watch his high school film. He's actually a really good running back, and he's a big physical presence. And to take that first ball and just run someone over, I think that the sidelines were electric at that point in time for him. He is one of the guys that just comes out every day and brings it. Like, there is no days off for that kid. He has fun every day. His mouth doesn't really stop when he's out on the field. He is just a constant, catalyst for making sure people are going to have a good day and practice at an elite level. Even if he's on scout team as a linebacker, it is loud and it is, in your face. And there's a whole lot more that makes that infectious, I think, which leads to those moments being pretty competitive. But it was fun to watch him carry the ball because he did it for 2 weeks in a row as the running back down there. When we were down a bunch of running backs, he came down and played a bunch of scout team running back. And, it's in there, that's for sure.
Since we weren't there, like, what other guys, you always talk about the guys that were revealed, since we weren't there, what kind of guys do you think were revealed at Texas State that maybe you didn't get the chance to talk about after the game?
Well, I mean, we talk a lot about Fife, but not in the role that he played, as far as catching a touchdown and some of the pass game stuff that he does. But, his ability to block and the way he does it is phenomenal. There was a drive that, number 13, Landon Ellis, was on fire, from a big block early to a catch and putting his pads down, and just, playing a very physical, tough brand of football from the receiver position. That certainly stood out a whole bunch to me. And then I think that, just the progression and the connection from these quarterbacks to these receivers keep showing up over and over again. On defense, there's a whole bunch of guys, that I think that the spotlight shines on them and they keep making plays. And they have to just continue to do that. Like, we have to continue to take, even when we were not, at the beginning of the year, when we looked very different than we do now, the objective was to know that we got better every single week on that field and every single day of practice. I said it before and I'll say it again, but the real challenge for these guys is how good can you be personally? How good can you as a player on this team be? And if all of you are doing it in your position group, then how good can that position group be? And if that position group are doing it, then how good can that offense and defense and special teams units be? And if we're all looking at that and attacking that every single day, then the question becomes, how good can this team be? And those are the questions that still haven't been answered that we got to make sure that we're progressing towards.
In today's era of college football, we always talk about like how programs will look different year to year, but I think Marshall more so than any of the other ones. It's not the same team that you guys saw last year in November. Yeah. So how do you make sure that you're, using what you're seeing on film this year and not really using maybe what you saw a year ago or the emotions that you felt a year ago after that game?
Yeah, well, I think that's the Marshall team is down there in Mississippi somewhere, right? Like, so this is not the Marshall team. This is a different team. So I think our guys fully are aware of that. And there's, what we do every day in film study, et cetera. This is a very different team, and they understand that. This isn't, a game of, hey, let's go get Marshall. This is there's 70-some guys on this team that weren't there a year ago. So this is about this game this week, handling your responsibility like we do every single week.